A show about luxury bags carefully handcrafted in China. Turns out your quote-unquote made in Italy luxury handbag might have more ties to Chinese factories than to Tuscany. Thanks to viral TikToks from Chinese factory workers, the internet is now in a frenzy.
Price $23,000, but Guangzhou price $600.
For years, the Hermès Birkin has stood as the crown jewel of quiet wealth. Not flashy, not mass-produced, but whispered about in elite circles like some secret handshake. You couldn't just walk into a store and buy one. You had to wait, earn it, know someone, or pay triple on the resale market just to touch one. That scarcity? It was part of the mystique, and it worked. The Birkin wasn't just a bag. It was a badge of power, of exclusivity, of status. But what if that entire image was built on a lie?
Recognize this style, this bag? Of course you do. For the past more than 30 years, we have been OEM factory for most of the luxury brands around the world. Gucci, Prada, Coach, Louis Vuitton.
What if the bag that's supposed to be handcrafted by skilled French artisans in sunlit workshops tucked away in the countryside was actually being stitched together in Chinese factories?
At Hermès boutique will cost you 38,000 USD. But what is the real cost out of the factory? Today, I'm going to break it down in front of you, step by step. First thing first, Hermès only use the leathers from the 3 top-level suppliers. One is called Nuti from Italy. The second is Weinheim from Germany, and the third is Haas from France. One piece of Togo leather, the same leather as this one, will cost 450 USD.
What if the thing you were told was rare and refined was, in reality, being pumped out assembly line style overseas? Because according to a recent leak, that's exactly what might be happening.
And one piece of the leather is only enough to make one Birkin, okay? And next, the thread. And of course, for Hermès Birkin, the thread is also the best top level. It's called Fil à Chinois from France. This is actually the Rolls Royce.
And not just rumors or speculation. We're talking photos, videos, and insider testimony exposing what could be one of the biggest luxury scandals in years. Some say Hermès is panicking behind the scenes, yanking inventory, silencing employees, and launching a quiet cover-up while the internet demands answers. Today, we're diving deep into the story that could change how we look at the entire luxury fashion industry. We'll break down what was leaked, why Hermès might be scrambling, and what this means not just for Birkin owners, but for anyone who's ever believed in the illusion of high-end exclusivity. Because if the Birkin myth is falling apart, what else is a lie?
In thread. For each bag, the cost is 25 USD. And then the hardware. See, this hardware is called 316 hardware. It's also known as the ocean stainless steel because it can withstand the erosion of seawater. It's the best stainless steel. For one piece of bag, the hardware will cost 150 USD. The edge oil.
Started quietly, as most industry scandals do. A handful of blurry images, a short clip from what looked like a factory floor, and a few whispers on niche fashion forums. At first, people dismissed it. It's fake, they said. Probably another knockoff facility. But then, more began to surface.
This edge oil is imported from Italy. It's called heat seal edge oil. For each bag, it will cost 50 USD. The interior lining, it used lambskin imported from France. For each bag, the cost will be 100 USD. And also inside, there is a zipper from Riri brand. And the zipper for one bag is 10 USD. And then the cost of human resource. The French artisans is much more expensive than Chinese artisans to finish one bag.
Video evidence, shipment tags, close-ups of stitching, tags that matched Hermès model codes, components that were indistinguishable from the real thing, and some that had Hermès branding right on them.
The human resource cost will be 600 USD. The package, this is not that expensive. It's 10 USD. So now to sum those up, the total cost will be 1,400 USD for one Birkin out of factory.
The footage wasn't coming from some counterfeit operation in the back alleys of Guangzhou. It appeared to show a large-scale industrial facility. And here's where things got serious. Some fashion insiders who had worked with Hermès before started to recognize the products being handled. Not just inspired designs, but actual production parts. Whistleblowers claimed these factories were authorized subcontractors, quietly used by Hermès to meet growing global demand. Handles, linings, even full bag bodies, allegedly crafted overseas, then sent to France for final stitching and labeling. If true, this meant the very foundation of Hermès' luxury claim. Full in-house, French craftsmanship might be, at best, a half-truth, and the timing couldn't have been worse. Just months earlier, Hermès had raised prices again, citing rising labor costs in their French ateliers. Social media exploded with side-by-side comparisons. Photos from the Chinese factories were matched with existing Birkin bag models, stitch patterns, hardware molds, even packing materials. The outrage spread fast, not just because of where the bags were made, but because of what it represented. People weren't just angry about the location, they were angry about the lie, the illusion they'd bought into, the thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars paid for a promise that now felt hollow. And Hermès? They said nothing, no statement, no denial, no clarification, just silence. That silence spoke louder than any denial ever could. But what made this leak so damaging wasn't just the revelation, it was what it suggested about the entire luxury industry. Because if the most iconic brand in fashion could be hiding something like this, who else was doing it? Here's something most luxury brands will never admit publicly. Outsourcing is everywhere, even at the very top. For decades, Hermès sold us the fantasy that each Birkin was carefully hand-stitched by a single artisan in France, using techniques passed down through generations. It wasn't just branding, it was a story, a legacy. But behind the story is the cold truth of modern business. Demand exploded, and Hermès couldn't keep up. Global expansion, billionaire clients, waiting lists years long. Suddenly, slow luxury didn't match the pace of their profits. That's when whispers about subcontracted workshops began circulating, not just in France, but globally. Quiet, hidden locations where components could be cut, prepped, even partially assembled before being sent to a French studio for finishing. It's a loophole in the definition of made in France. As long as the bag is completed and inspected in France, they can legally stamp it with that label, even if most of the labor was done elsewhere. And Hermès isn't alone. Other big names in fashion, Louis Vuitton, Prada, Gucci, have all faced similar accusations. They rely on satellite workshops, many based in Spain, Portugal, or yes, China. The public doesn't always know, and that's by design. Outsourcing is treated like a dirty little secret, the kind of thing brands will fight to keep buried because the illusion is just too valuable. But in Hermès's case, the scandal hits harder because the Birkin isn't just any product. It's the luxury product, the one with the wait lists, the celebrity endorsements, the investment value. It's often sold as heirloom quality. That narrative only works if the bag is the result of tradition, patience, and perfection. So when the leak revealed mass production techniques, factory workers rotating shifts on stitching lines, and dozens of bags being handled in batches, it wasn't just an image problem, it was a betrayal. Behind the romantic story of a French artisan quietly stitching away in a candlelit studio is fluorescent lights, bulk orders, and industrial efficiency. It's not illegal, it's not even uncommon, but for a brand like Hermès, whose very identity depends on the illusion of exclusivity, it's devastating. And perhaps, most damaging of all, if they're doing it, everyone might be. When the leak went viral, Hermès did what luxury brands always do at the start of a scandal. Nothing. Not a press release, not a comment, not a peep on social media. Silence. And to some, that might have seemed like confidence, like they were above it. But behind the scenes, that silence masked a scramble. Because if the claims were true, and the photos, videos, and reports certainly looked credible, Hermès had a full-blown crisis on its hands. Insiders began leaking more than just photos. Internal emails, WhatsApp chats, memos, reports of urgent meetings with boutique managers, orders to pull certain bag models off the shelves with no explanation. Some stores even removed Birkin and Kelly displays entirely, swapping them for other items, pretending it was just a seasonal change. Then came the influencer blackout. TikTok creators and Instagram fashion accounts, ones who'd previously flaunted their Hermès connections, suddenly went quiet. Some deleted posts, others stopped tagging the brand entirely. A few even issued cryptic statements saying they were reassessing their partnerships. When online luxury resellers started asking questions, many of them got hit with vague legal warnings and NDAs. And that's when the most explosive claims surfaced, that Hermès staff were being silenced. Multiple anonymous sources claimed employees were being told to stay off social media, avoid using the word China in any context, and refer all questions to corporate legal. There were even rumors of hush payments offered to workers involved in overseas production. This wasn't just crisis management. This was containment. A full-scale lockdown designed to buy time, assess the fallout, and hope the outrage would fade away before it reached boiling point. But here's the thing. In 2025, nothing stays hidden for long. Screenshots spread, whistleblowers multiply, and the more Hermès tried to shut the story down, the louder it got. The brand had spent decades building a castle out of image, tradition, and myth, but now it was clear that castle had cracks, and no amount of silence could stop the internet from tearing it down brick by brick. When a luxury brand stumbles, the impact doesn't stop at the front door. It echoes across the entire industry. And the Hermès leak? It didn't just shake up Birkin buyers. It triggered a full-on identity crisis for every high-end fashion house, riding on the myth of heritage, exclusivity, and craftsmanship. See, the luxury ecosystem isn't just about products. It's about perception. People don't drop tens of thousands of dollars on a bag just because it looks nice. They do it because it's rare, because it feels different, because they've been told a story that elevates it above the rest. That story of old-world artisans, limited production, French elegance is what allows brands like Hermès, Chanel, and Louis Vuitton to charge 10 times more than what the materials or labor are worth. So when the brand most associated with handcrafted prestige gets caught outsourcing production to China, suddenly everyone else comes under the microscope. Fashion watchdogs and online sleuths turned their attention to competitors. Old rumors about Louis Vuitton's use of Spanish and US factories resurfaced. Questions about Dior's leather sourcing exploded on TikTok. Consumers started demanding proof, receipts, not marketing. They wanted videos of artisans in ateliers, not just glossy ad campaigns and heritage blurbs on the company website. Even brands that weren't implicated felt the pressure. The trust was broken. If Hermès could be this misleading, who could be trusted? Celebrities who had flaunted their Birkin collections went quiet. Fashion journalists who once praised luxury brands started calling for transparency. And resale markets, where Birkins are treated like investments, took a sudden dip in confidence. The ripple effect went further than just handbags. It exposed something uncomfortable about the entire idea of luxury in 2025. That it's less about quality and more about curated deception. That the price you're paying isn't for craftsmanship, it's for control of the narrative. The idea that you're better, that you belong to a world most people can't access. But once you realize that world is held together by PR teams, offshore labor, and vague definitions of made in, the illusion starts to fall apart. And people are angry, not just at Hermès, but at the system that allowed the lie to flourish unchecked for so long. For years, luxury brands operated like modern royalty, untouchable, unquestioned. But now, the curtain has been pulled back, and behind it, the emperor may not be wearing anything at all. Let's be clear, the Birkin wasn't just another high-end item. It was the gold standard, a cultural symbol, a piece of fashion history with its own mythology, named after Jane Birkin. Waitlists that ran for years, prices that appreciated like real estate, and a sense of prestige that no other bag could match. But all of that depended on one thing: belief. The belief that this wasn't mass market, that it wasn't just about leather and stitching, it was about legacy. A Birkin wasn't supposed to be something you could just buy. It was a reward, a trophy, something that meant you were chosen. Now, that illusion is breaking. Collectors are worried. The resale market is jittery. People who once proudly posted their Birkins on Instagram are second-guessing whether it still signals status, or if it now makes them look naive. Because what happens when the world finds out that the most coveted bag might not even be fully made in France? And the damage doesn't stop at reputation. It cuts deep into Hermès's core business model. Part of what made Birkins feel valuable was the artificial scarcity, the idea that only a few were made by a handful of elite craftsmen. But if bags are being made in factories across the globe, suddenly that rarity doesn't feel so rare. And that price? It starts to look less like a symbol of class and more like a punchline. This also threatens Hermès' most powerful asset, brand trust. That quiet, unquestioned loyalty that makes someone buy the same brand over and over, even when the prices keep climbing. That's what makes luxury work. Not the product, but the belief. If that belief is gone, what's left? Just a bag. And once you strip away the mystique, the exclusivity, the French fairy tale, is it really worth $20,000, $40,000, $100,000? Because now people are asking hard questions. Is the Hermès Birkin just the fashion industry's biggest illusion? And if the cracks are already showing, how much longer before the whole thing collapses? So what does a brand like Hermès do when the crown jewel of its empire starts to crumble? Historically, high luxury companies follow a very specific playbook when controversy hits. Deny nothing, admit nothing, and wait for the outrage to pass. They rely on their customers' short attention spans and their competitors' willingness to stay quiet, because no brand wants to set a precedent that forces transparency across the board. But this time, the damage might be too big to ignore. Legal experts are already weighing in. If the claims of misleading marketing are proven true, Hermès could face class action lawsuits, especially in the US, where advertising laws around origin of production are strict. Consumers who paid tens of thousands for authentic French craftsmanship may demand compensation, or worse, legal action for deception. Then there's the investor angle. Hermès is a publicly traded company, and any breach of consumer trust can rattle shareholder confidence. If the brand's most iconic product becomes a liability instead of an asset, the board will have to respond. Maybe not with a public apology. Hermès has never been one to grovel, but with a rebrand, a policy shift, or a sacrificial executive resignation to calm the storm. There's also speculation that Hermès may try to quietly phase out certain production practices, or start certifying bags with new origin guarantees to restore buyer confidence. But let's be honest, once the seed of doubt is planted, it's hard to undo. Meanwhile, rival brands are watching closely. Some may try to distance themselves from the scandal, reaffirming their own transparency. Others might stay silent, hoping not to attract attention to their own outsourced practices. But the real wild card? The consumers. If this scandal sparks a cultural shift, where buyers begin demanding receipts, factory tours, and artisan footage before spending big, the entire luxury model could face a reckoning. Because Hermès didn't just sell a bag, they sold a belief system, a status fantasy. And now, that fantasy has a glitch. So what happens next? Hermès has three options. Double down and say nothing, hoping the mystique still holds. Admit a supply chain lapse, blame subcontractors, and try to control the narrative. Pivot toward full transparency, becoming the first legacy brand to open up its process and turn the scandal into a redemption arc. But even if they survive this, the Birkin myth may never fully recover. For decades, the Hermès Birkin bag wasn't just an accessory. It was a currency, a signal, a piece of art wrapped in legend, proof that you belong to a world most people could only dream of. But now, that legend has a crack, because once you find out that the story behind the status might be just that, a story, it's impossible to see the product the same way again. A $25,000 handbag stitched in a quiet French studio by a master craftsman, that's one thing, but a nearly identical product stitched in a Chinese subcontracted factory, then quietly branded as made in France, that hits different. And it forces a bigger question. What are we actually paying for when we buy luxury? The materials, the labor, the craftsmanship, or just the feeling, the illusion of being part of something elite, rare, and untouchable? Because if Hermès, the most mythologized brand in the game, is caught playing fast and loose with the truth, what else is an illusion? Luxury has always been about image, about what a product represents more than what it is. But maybe we're reaching a tipping point. Maybe this scandal isn't just about a bag. Maybe it's about peeling back the layers of an entire industry and realizing that beneath the gold foil and perfect stitching is just another company trying to maximize profit. The Birkin will probably survive this. The rich will still buy it. The waitlists may bounce back. But something deeper has shifted. A trust, a mystique, a belief. And once that breaks, it doesn't get repaired. It lingers. So next time someone flashes a Birkin in your face like it's a badge of class and craftsmanship, you might just wonder, is it really French? Or is it just really well marketed?